Alita formally greeted Marquis Mardano, acknowledging the unspoken consensus behind their exchange. In truth, all the elaborate courtesies meant the same thing. Everyone involved understood the arrangement perfectly. Alita expressed her satisfaction that their intentions aligned, then calmly inquired about the progress made with the others. Marquis Mardano replied that the outcome had been favorable. It had been a rare honor, and not a single participant had hesitated to accept. As he reflected, the significance of the situation became increasingly clear. Duke Alia, a man known for rarely involving himself directly, had personally stepped forward and given his approval, but only after carefully selecting the appropriate leverage. That alone spoke volumes. Following that, they had been required to pass an unspoken trial, one that involved a sincere offering, thinly veiled as etiquette. Though rumors were already spreading at alarming speed, this was simply how the current political currents moved. Recognizing the weight of the moment, Mark understood that failing to act now would mean losing the initiative entirely. Alita's expression grew serious. With everything now in place, she concluded that they could finally move forward in earnest, though only with a carefully chosen inner circle. Attention then shifted to Alan. He explained that by the fourth day of the banquet, rewards had begun appearing one after another, almost suspiciously. He assumed this special treatment stemmed from a fabricated rumor tying him to both Alia and Zenonia. For the time being, he decided to accept the spoils, fully prepared for the possibility that they might later be reclaimed. In his mind, he treated the situation as a clean hit and run. Just then, Koi appeared behind him and casually rested a hand on Alan's shoulder, announcing his return. Caught off guard, Alan reacted with an involuntary hiccup. Evan immediately noticed and asked why Alan looked so startled. Confirming that Koi had indeed returned, Alan quickly waved it off, claiming he had merely been lost in thought. The scene shifted to a quieter exchange between Alan and Evan. After listening to Evan's report, Alan was visibly shaken. An outer god had descended in the northern regions. Evan confirmed the news, adding that Caliban was already in chaos. According to ancient records, scholars believe the amethysts were deeply connected to the outer gods. Alan then asked about the additional information he had requested earlier. Evan revealed that the individual Alan was searching for had been located in a village north of Ashton. He then firmly stated that their ultimate destination would be Caliban. Evan was stunned by the sudden decision and asked why Caliban had been chosen. Sensing his confusion, Alan said he would explain everything on the road and instructed Evan to begin preparations for immediate departure. Evan acknowledged the order and left at once. Left alone, Alan exhaled slowly. His thoughts lingered on how things had unfolded. He had truly hoped it would never reach this point, but reality had left him no other choice. Disasters born from existence itself, entities such as the five great sins, and the outer gods were never bound by logic or foresight. No one could predict which outer god would descend, nor when a divine incarnation would take place. That very uncertainty was why he had spent so much effort gathering intelligence and acting ahead of time. Even so, he had never imagined events would accelerate this quickly. As fragments of information and shifting probabilities raced through his mind, memories from the game he once played resurfaced. He had witnessed countless branching outcomes there, and now the conclusion assembled itself with frightening clarity. The allied kingdoms would fracture and fall, destroying one another in pointless conflicts across lands tainted by forces beyond this world. In the end, his own life would be erased without warning. He steadied himself by recalling the countermeasure he had prepared. When an outer god descended, it entered a dormant stabilization phase that lasted several months. During that period, the being could not yet function as a fully awakened god, nor wield its power as a heroic spirit. That narrow window was the only time such an existence could be challenged. There were no guarantees, but hesitation would lead only to annihilation. This was the sole path forward. With his resolve set, a brief and unrelated thought crossed his mind. What kind of things that kid might like? Once that idea settled, Alan picked up his pen and began writing. 1 week later, the vice commander approached the commanding officer and presented Alan's letter. The moment the commander realized it carried official authority, his expression stiffened in shock. Without delay, he issued a firm directive. The vice commander acknowledged the order and was instructed to announce that the next northern operation would be postponed by 2 weeks. The scene shifted to Pakran, a quiet village north of the Ashtalan kingdom. As Alan spotted a figure ahead, he felt a faint sense of disbelief. He had never expected to find him so easily. The encounter felt almost unreal. Standing before them was a bright-eyed boy who greeted them warmly. His demeanor open and sincere. Alan observed him carefully. The child stood out immediately. There was no doubt about it. This was the protagonist. The playable main character from the Liban roguelike, turn-based APS psychedelia. Seeing him in person confirmed it. A protagonist truly was a protagonist. The boy looked exactly as he had in the illustrations. Youthful, striking, and almost unnaturally beautiful. Alan asked whether the boy knew who he was. The child shook his head, smiling, and said he was simply glad to meet someone new. He introduced himself as Olaban. No matter how much this world differed from the game, Alan reflected, the protagonist would always remain the protagonist. In time, Olaban would rise to fame and strength without fail. Outwardly, Alan remarked that the boy had a cheerful personality, while inwardly acknowledging how strange it felt to stand before someone he had once controlled with his own hands. Alan then handed Olaban a small pouch. He told him it was a gift. When the boy opened it, his eyes widened at the sight of numerous gold coins spilling. Alan then gestured to Evan, who stepped forward and opened a second container in front of Olaban. Inside was a neatly arranged supply of potions. Evan explained calmly that everything in the box now belonged to him. Olaban froze, then broke into delighted laughter. He looked genuinely overwhelmed, repeatedly asking if it was truly meant for him, and why such a gift was being given so suddenly. Alan replied simply that it was an investment. Internally, he affirmed that he had brought everything a protagonist needed for early growth. He explained that Olaban was destined for greatness, that one day he would stand at the center of the world. And silently, Alan added another thought. Grow faster, so you can face things like the outer gods in my place. As more invisible indicators aligned in his mind, Alan briefly wondered if he should have given even more. Still, it felt like he had secured Olaban's favor. Then he realized his mistake. He hadn't introduced himself. I am Count Palacio, Alan said. Olaban blinked, then nodded enthusiastically. He declared that this was the name he would remember and give thanks to when he succeeded. After correcting himself, he bowed politely and expressed sincere gratitude. Before leaving, Olaban cheerfully waved goodbye to Evan. Watching him go, Alan frowned slightly. He couldn't help but question whether the protagonist had always been this cheerful. For a world rooted in dark fantasy, such optimism felt out of place. As they turned to leave, Evan spoke up. He acknowledged Alan's intent, but pointed out that they hadn't even spoken properly. Alan replied that Olaban was perceptive. He would understand. In truth, Alan knew he didn't have the luxury of building bonds. His own survival was at stake. This was nothing more than setting the protagonist on an automated path. Pay to win, he decided, was the most efficient strategy. Evan remarked on the boy's abnormal talent. His mana was dense, constantly circulating, and despite wearing plain clothes, he felt as though he was equipped with hidden artifacts. Alan agreed. He could sense it too. In the original setting, Olaban had been ordinary at the start. This deviation was another unexpected butterfly effect. Still, Alan didn't dwell on it. As long as the plan held, nothing else mattered. The stronger Olaban became, the safer Alan's future would be. The investment would pay off. He reassured Evan that Olaban was one of the few genuinely kind individuals in that brutal world. A moment later, doubt surfaced. Kind-hearted, really? The thought felt less certain than before. Changing the subject, Alan mentioned Doze, saying Evan would meet him soon. Privately, Alan reflected that he had always avoided that place out of fear. He never imagined circumstances would force his hand like this. Evan, visibly anxious, asked whether he would at least be allowed to see them. Alan hesitated before answering that it would probably happen. The uncertainty carried the quiet grief of a young transmigrator facing a future he never wanted. Later, back in his room, Alan began inspecting his belongings. The space was cluttered with items of all kinds. Evan stared in disbelief, asking why he had purchased so many strange things. Alan replied calmly that they weren't random at all. They're offerings, he said. Bribes for my future lifeline. 10 days later, the capital city of the Caliban region, Kedum, appeared beneath a sky steeped in oppressive gloom. A grayish light hung low over the sprawling city, as though the heavens themselves were weighed down by an unseen burden. Along the main road leading to the northern gate, a long procession of armored knights escorted several noble carriages forward at a steady pace. The rhythmic clatter of hooves and the creaking of wheels echoed faintly through the cold air. Inside one of the carriages, Yuan sat with his back against the wall, his brows tightly knit in frustration. His normally calm demeanor was gone, replaced by clear exhaustion etched across his face. I'm exhausted, Yuan muttered, rubbing his temples with both hands. His voice carried genuine fatigue. We've almost reached the north gate of Kedam, but it feels like this road will never end. Across from him, Alan leaned lazily against the carriage seat, one arm resting at his side. His posture was relaxed, almost indifferent, as though the long journey had barely affected him. Long journeys are bound to be tiring, Alan replied calmly. At least we didn't encounter a maze at the end. Yen let out a weary breath and shook his head. As long as we don't suddenly run into some strange labyrinth, I can still endure this. His gaze shifted toward his master. Alan tilted his head slightly, irritation flashing briefly through his eyes before fading just as quickly. Well, Alan said flatly, it can't be helped. Lowering his gaze, Alan looked down at the locket chain resting in his palm. The necklace shimmered faintly, catching the dim light filtering through the carriage window. He stared at it in silence, his thoughts drifting far from the present. They had been wandering for days now, moving from place to place, preparing for what was inevitably coming. The battle against the heretic gods loomed ahead, unavoidable and merciless. This is definitely a gift for your wife, Alan said, her voice light and teasing as she leaned slightly closer. A faint smile curved her lips. I wonder if Dinas will like it. Alan did not respond. His fingers tightened subtly around the chain, his eyes still fixed on the locket as if it held answers he couldn't yet grasp. It's really good, Master, Yuen added sincerely. A father's heartfelt desire to give his child a gift. It suits you well, and it'll be our turn soon. Alan remained quiet. Moments later, the carriage jolted gently and came to a halt. Yuen straightened immediately and stepped down from the carriage, his expression composed once more. The checkpoint captain will probably just verify our identity, he said calmly. I'll be back shortly. Go on, Alan replied with a sigh of relief. At least the inspection here is quick. That's something to be thankful for. But only a short while later, Yuen's footsteps stopped abruptly. His expression changed. Count, Yuen said carefully as he returned, lowering his voice. There's a small problem. Alan's eyes widened. A problem? What kind of problem? They suddenly told us to move aside, Yuen replied. The inspection didn't go as expected. Alan frowned and stepped out of the carriage, his boots landing softly on the stone road. His eyes swept across the checkpoint with sharp focus. The identity verification is complete, Yuen continued quietly. But something feels off. Before Alan could respond, a loud and arrogant voice rang out. That's Count Palatineo, isn't it? A sturdy man stepped forward, his posture brimming with self-importance. He wore finely polished armor and carried himself as though the world existed solely to acknowledge him. I am the fourth sword, Baron, the man announced proudly, lifting his chin. A direct disciple of the great knight Faloya. His eyes were filled with open contempt as they locked onto Alan. Alan's gaze darkened instantly. Faloya? What nonsense! The man's arrogance and crude behavior irritated him at once. Bringing knights along like this, Alan asked coldly, what exactly is going on? Baron sneered. Coincidentally, some of my friends live in the kingdom of Austrian. I just wanted to let you know. He paused deliberately. I owe them a small favor. Alan's expression stiffened. Kamina, that bastard noble. Baron chuckled, clearly enjoying himself. Looks like you've made my friends hate you quite a bit. As he spoke, memories of the magical voice transmission he had received earlier resurfaced vividly in his mind. That guy, Alan, humiliated Kamina at the banquet. The voice had mocked. If you want to improve your strength, use more power cores. And if you disable him or kill him, I'll give you what you want. Back in the present, Baron laughed loudly. I owe him money, so I'm just fulfilling his request. At his signal, the surrounding knights stepped forward, weapons half drawn, clearly ready to seize Alan. Alan let out a slow breath, his voice steady but cold. That idiot started a fight and ran away. What exactly did I do wrong? Baron smirked. Hand over all the valuables in the carriage. If you do, I might spare your life. Alan's gaze sharpened dangerously. What kind of ridiculous demand is that? With a cruel laugh, Baron drew his sword and pointed it straight at Alan. No loss either way. You're from the kingdom of Austrian, virtually powerless in the Union. And you're a noble with no ties to Caliban. No one will care. His laughter echoed loudly. Alan's expression hardened completely. They really suit each other, he said calmly. I'll teach you a lesson. Energy surged around his hand, invisible but overwhelming. In the next instant, Baron's eyes widened in shock. Before he could even react, his attack stopped short. His neck was suddenly seized by an unseen force. His body lifted slightly off the ground, He screamed in pain, thrashing desperately. Who? Who is it? Alan froze. The energy around him dispersed instantly as shock washed over his face. Standing behind Baron was a knight he had not noticed before. The knight's voice rang out coldly, sharp with anger. What kind of madness are you pulling here, brat? Baron struggled violently. How dare you hurt me? Alan's pupils shrank. He could feel it clearly. That man was blessed by the sword. The knight tightened his grip around Baron's neck and spoke in an icy tone. Turning your sword against your benefactor, how dare you? Slowly the knight lifted his head. His face was revealed. It was Deus. Alan's mind reeled. Deus, one of the 5 deadly sins. The man who had once fought and emerged victorious from the Karuta snowfield duel. And more importantly, the one who followed the great moon. Before Baron could react again, Deus slammed him violently into the ground. A deafening impact echoed. Baron groans loudly in pain as Deus relentlessly kicks him again and again without mercy. Deus then grabs Varen's hair with an iron grip, holding him down with overwhelming force. Maintaining a cold, deathly glare, Deus shifts his attention toward the surrounding knights and issues a clear warning. He makes it known that if even a single one of them dares to move, the consequences will be beyond their imagination. Deus delivers a brutal kick straight into Varen's chest, so powerful that blood spills from Varen's mouth as he is sent flying and crashes far away. Alan watches in shock, a realization forming in his mind as he recognizes that knight, understanding that this is the present-day Deus. Deus then makes it clear to Varun that he should be grateful to be in a situation where he cannot be killed. Varun struggles to even stand after the earlier attacks, barely able to move as he leans against a tree for support. In the very next moment, Deus steps in and slams his knee forcefully into Varun's chest, sending him crashing violently into the tree once again. Varun's cheeks swell badly from Deus's kick, and Deus continues to strike him mercilessly, landing punch after punch and kick after kick without pause. Nearby, Evan remarks to Alan that his strike was quite impressive. Hearing this, Alan's mind drifts back to the moment when Deus had declared his outrage at anyone daring to lay a hand on his benefactor. A realization settles in as Alan reflects that Deus did, in fact, call him his benefactor. He considers how Deus may have been grateful when he was young, yet now that he has grown, Alan assumed he would not welcome someone he barely knew. He remembers that Deus never even sent a single reply, and it makes him feel as though he has received every possible reward for raising a son. Alan acknowledges to himself that Deus has truly grown, calling him a troublesome rascal in his thoughts, yet admitting his genuine growth. The impression becomes clear, marked as 52% certain, that one can plainly see who sponsored Deus. As he has developed remarkably well, Alan recognizes that Deus has matured into an exceptionally upright young man. With this realization, Alan reflects on how this must be what it feels like to see a well-raised son, and he feels a deep sense of pride as a father. A heavy impact echoes through the scene. Evan then teasingly points out to Alan that he is aware his son is beating someone senseless. Alan responds by making it clear that he cannot hear him. Deep inside, Alan understands that Deus stepped forward like this because his father had been slighted in a foreign land. As this thought settles in, the scene shows Deus continuing to kick Varan mercilessly, showing no restraint at all. Another thought crosses Alan's mind as he wonders why his son is unbearably sweet like this. Soon after, Varan is shown taking an overwhelming beating, struck again and again, until he finally loses consciousness. Even then, Alan cannot help but think that this still feels a bit excessive. At that moment, another realization suddenly occurs to Alan, reminding him once more that Deus is one of the 5 great sins. As the situation shifts, Deus is seen turning and walking toward Alan. He then stops in front of him, bows respectfully, and wears a confident smile as he states that he will escort him. Hearing this, the remaining knights are left completely shocked by what they witness.